Welcome to another episode of ECTV's Roundtable Discussions. I'm your host, Travis Prince, and today my guest is Danny Laffey. Hey, Danny, how's it going?
Great, Travis. How are you?
Pretty good, man. Pretty good. I'm so happy to have you here. Been a big fan of your art for several years now. A couple years I've been following your art, and I'm just happy to have you in a conversation today.
Thanks. I'm happy to be here.
All right, great. So the first thing I want you to do is just tell a little bit about yourself to our viewers so they can get a sense of who you are.
Sure. Well, I'm from the area. I grew up here, and between South Scranton, Minooka, and then in Moosic, and went to school at Riverside High School in Taylor, and then went on to the University of Scranton. So I graduated from the University of Scranton. My degree is in communication, so art didn't really come into play until a little bit later in my life, but eventually found my way into art.
Well, I lived in Taylor for about 6 or 7 years. Really, It's a really nice area.
Yeah,
and
it's a tight-knit community.
Yeah, the Taylor, like you say, that Minooka area is just a really, really nice area that I wish I would have grew up in that area. It just seems.
Yeah, it's great. I love spending as much time here as possible, and it's where all my family is from, and just enjoy seeing everybody.
Yeah, so you said you went to the University of Scranton.
Yes.
And you received a degree in communications.
Yes.
So did you always have a love for art, or how did that come about?
No, artistically, I never really had any real inclination to get involved with the arts. I took one art class at the University of Scranton, and it never really dawned on me to delve into that. Flash forward about 10 years, and I was living in the Philly suburbs at the time, and I met a guy who became a friend, and he was an artist, and through interacting with him, I started to kind of be exposed to the art world. And I would go to some of his shows in New York.
And this is 10 years after you graduated.
Yeah,
Wow.
It was definitely about 10 years. And so I would travel with him to his shows. I'd go to New York and see a show, or Philadelphia, and we'd go. We went to a couple galleries and museums and stuff. And so I got exposed to the art world that way, and started to see different forms of art. I think I had a very narrow idea of what it was to be an artist, and it was certainly my first real exposure to contemporary art, and it just kind of opened my eyes a little bit. And I didn't jump right into it at that point, but I think it kind of put it in my head a little bit.
A little idea.
Yeah, and then basically what happened was I was, with my full-time career, I was in between positions, and I had some time off. It was the middle of the winter, and I was bored, and I had that idea in my head, and one day I decided I'm going to go and buy some canvases and paints and just mess around, and I just immediately fell in love with it.
Wow.
And I had no idea what I was doing, but I didn't care. I just loved it right from the start, and it just opened up this creativity in me that maybe was always there, and I just didn't have anything to bring it out. And from there, I just kind of kept going and I've never stopped.
So this friend who introduced you to the art world, he was an artist himself.
Yeah, he's still an artist, and he's an Irish artist, and he, without having not met him, I probably would not be painting today.
Did his art have a dramatic effect on you, or do you take things from his art? Or?
His art is much different than mine. Our styles are certainly different, and our subjects are certainly different, but and he was schooled, he had all the, the schooling and the background technically and everything. And, but, it was just, that exposure to it and seeing things, you know, at some of the shows that I went to, and I was like, wow, you know, I can maybe, I'd like to try this.
Yeah.
I'd like to, and then from there, it was at that point that I started to kind of research and learn more about the art world, the art history, learning about artists, and from that point, I kind of found my niche, my where I wanted to go, what drew me to this art, you
Yeah.
know, and to this form of expression, you know, which was different than his, but you know, I kind of found my way that way.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we actually have a very similar story to how we began art, because you said you were in between positions in your
Yeah,
career and
yeah.
you had some downtime and you found yourself bored one day.
Yeah.
And almost the exact same thing happened for me when I started taking my art serious. It was about 11 years ago, and very much the same situation where I had everything that I need in life, pretty decent job, girlfriend, cars, friends, extracurricular activities and things like that. And one day I was sitting at home and I didn't want to do anything. I didn't want to hang out with friends.
Yeah.
I didn't want to play video games. I didn't want to go to the mall, and I found myself so bored. It was like almost mind numbing to the point where it's like, what can I do to entertain myself? And
Yeah.
I ran out and picked up some paints and a canvas and decided to start painting something. And like you said, once that creative spark kicked in, it has not went away since. And
Yeah.
I see a very similar thing with you.
Yeah, it's just, it's amazing. I mean, I had never really had any like hobbies necessarily or anything that I did myself creatively after, you know, after college. I played sports when I was younger and you know, baseball but after that end, you know, it was kind of just, you know, work and home, and finding painting was just like this other realm of, you know, that it was just opened up, you know, a side of me that I had never really known was there. And it just brought me a lot of, you know, happiness and inspiration to, as soon as I started painting, you know, and it was interesting because I didn't really, like I said, having had no artistic background up until that point, and really had no training or, you know, I didn't really know what, you know, what I was doing or why I was doing it. It was just full on, you know, just an explosion of, I was just painting at a rapid pace. But I didn't really care if it was good or bad.
Yeah.
I was just happy to be doing it. And I think I still am, you know, I still have that mindset that I'm going to do it either way, you know, because it's something I enjoy doing. And then, you know, to have the opportunity to share it with the world is a great thing,
Yeah.
you know.
I think not being traditionally trained as an artist through university is a plus for some people, especially when you're using art just as an emotional
Yeah.
and creative outlet.
Yeah.
You know, just pure expression.
Right.
And without the hang-ups or the hinderings of what's correct and what's not, what's traditional and what's not,
Yeah.
that you would receive from university. So
Yeah.
I actually see that come across in your art, that
Yeah.
this is pure expression, and it's
Yeah.
and the form is just brilliant. So how long have you been like really in your craft? You started painting in
That was 2014.
2014.
That was the first time I ever painted. That was the winter of early 2014. And within a year, I was showing like my work, like I had a couple opportunities very early on
What were some of your first opportunities?
I did, the first show that I ever did was Raw Artists in Philadelphia on South Street. It was a big group show, all kinds of forms of art. And that was the first thing I ever did. And that was actually I think that was in May of 20, like, so I had just started painting like a few months earlier, and I signed up online to be in this show. And then by the end of 2014, I had the opportunity to show my work at Bluestone Fine Art Gallery in Old City in Philadelphia. And I worked with them for several years with that gallery.
Oh, wow.
So I was able to do a show there. So yeah, I just put it right out there and just went with it.
Yeah, you hit the ground running.
Yeah, I really did. And it was funny because like I could be self-conscious in a lot of ways, other areas of my life, but with my art, for some reason, I never really had that fear of whether people would like it or not, or laugh at it, or I just did it. Because, I didn't really have that self-conscious, worry about being good enough for, and what I found was that I met a lot of other artists that were just like me, that it was just like a community that's out there, that you meet some really great people that just love what they do, and that judgment that you worry about isn't, on some levels it is there, certain parts of, the art world, but it was great experience.
I know someone is gonna get on me for not knowing the artist, but some famous artist said that, don't try to make good art, just make art, and let everybody else decide if it's good or not.
That was Warhol.
No, okay, Andy.
Yeah.
So just make the art, and all the critics will decide if it's good or not.
Yeah.
If it feels good to you, and if it's like I say, that creative, emotional release, then that's all it's there for.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I always feel better when I'm painting, and over the last 7 years, I've had brief periods where I've kind of stepped away from it for a couple months, maybe at the most, and I can feel it at that time. Like
it's like an itch almost.
Yeah.
Yep.
After a while, I'm like, I need to get back into, and because it's just there, and I feel better when I'm creating, and it's just a very rewarding thing, very cathartic process.
Okay, so once again, your career is?
I work in property management.
Property management. So when someone asks you, so what do you do? Do you say I'm a property manager, or do you say I'm an artist?
I say I'm an artist, but it's interesting because my professional life on that end, working a 9-to-5 career in a corporate type environment, is filled with rules and processes, and I enjoy what I do, but then this is a completely alternate universe from that, and I think that's why I enjoyed doing it right from the start so much, was that with painting you can kind of play by your own rules, and and you're doing it your way, and it's kind of a very freeing experience that I found, that it was sort of a way to, just kind of block everything else out, and you're creating something from yourself, your own vision, your own coming right from you. So I just enjoyed that very much. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of turning it on and off, going from working in an office to working in the studio creating paintings. It's it's two different modes of mind. Your mind has to adjust a little bit.
So it doesn't seem like you've been painting for a long time.
No.
So in this period that you have been creating, has anyone said anything to you or given you some advice that you really, really were receptive to, that made you think like, hey, I can do this, or to look at art in a different way?
Yeah, I've had like I think like compliments come in weird ways sometimes. I had a guy that I worked with. He started a gallery down in North Carolina. I was living in Raleigh, North Carolina for the last 5 years, and then moved back here. And I worked with the guy down there. He was an artist himself, and he had started a gallery of his own. And I responded to a call for art, and he came to look at my work. And so he came by, and we were in my little studio, and he was kind of looking at all my work, and he was very honest with me, and he said, "Your art really isn't for me, but there's something about it that," and he more or less said, "I don't know if I don't really like what you necessarily, it's not really my thing, but I want to bring some of your paintings in." And so it was that kind of, I think in a way I appreciated that honesty, that maybe what I'm doing is not for everybody, just like any form of art, might not, but it had some kind of impact on him enough that, and that kind of motivated me that, I'm doing something that is maybe in some ways unique to me and my style and what I'm trying to express. And, it may not always connect with everybody in the same way, but it just kind of,
but that
kind
is
of
a
motivated me in a way.
That is a good compliment, though, for someone to say, it's not my taste, but I know other people would love this stuff. I would love to show this for other people.
Yeah, it was an interesting thing, and like, because anytime someone compliments you on what you're doing, and they say that's beautiful, or that that's always great to hear. But when you kind of get a compliment in almost like a sideways kind of way, it kind of took me back at first. But this guy, he's a very talented artist himself, and I just took it as a compliment, that although at first glance he may not have really understood what I was doing or appreciated it outright, but he was willing to take a second look.
So I want to talk about your art now. I got a lot to say about it, but I want to ask you, how did you create your format?
So this body of work, which I've kind of been in for the last 5 years, and I've created. I
want to stop you real quick. Hold that thought, but I want to commend you on doing something that took me 6-7 years to understand, is to create a series or a body of work. It took me forever to understand that, but then immediately when I look at your stuff, it's like you have this overall theme and this in your body of work that's congruent with each other, but it's still individual in itself. I'm sorry, I just had to throw that in there.
Yeah, no, that it's interesting you say that, because like I look at each painting as they're unique, and they're all different, but they're all the same in that way. But this style, the way when I first started to paint, my very first paintings were nothing like this at all. And I slowly started to look at color field paintings, and I was inspired by the abstract expressionists and that whole movement from the 50s and the 60s. And that was just the art that I gravitated towards. And so I started to play with color. And at first, it was really more of a situation where I was more or less just mixing mixing paint right on the canvas. I was just experimenting with blending colors. And again, it was all experimentation at that point. I didn't really have a deliberate process at that point, because I just hadn't gotten there yet. So it was like just pouring paint onto the canvas, and I didn't even have an easel. I would just stand over the canvas and just paint. But there was no structure like there is now. There was no hard edge element to it. And I took a trip to Rhode Island in the fall of 2014. And I came back from that trip, and I was in Westerly, Rhode Island on the beach, and it was fall. It was really beautiful. And I came back and I painted what was an attempt at like a seascape painting. And it was the first time that I ever painted what was like a horizon line. And not quite anything like this, but I divided the canvas from a top to bottom with a line. And that was it. That was the point in which I started to put the hard edge element into the work from that point on, because it gave the painting structure to me. It wasn't, the composition of the painting was not just all blended colors. Now there was some division, and there was, so from there it grew from there. And over time, it's become, I've started to really think more about what drives me to do this over and over and over and over. And as you paint, you start to ask yourself questions about why you're doing what you're doing. So after a few years of doing this, I remember asking myself, like, what am I doing here, and why? What's driving me to do this? And I think ultimately it's a fascination with color and relationships with color, and sort of the emotive power of color. I just find it fascinating, and there's really never an end to it. There's always something more to explore.
What medium do you work with?
This is acrylic. I've a little bit with oils here and there, but not in a long time. So I mainly work with acrylics and some mediums to kind of dilute it a little bit, and but it's all acrylic.
I remember the first time I saw your piece. You had a show at
it's at the Marquee.
At Marquee Gallery, and I saw one piece and immediately saw like this landscape, and like you say, it had blues and whites, and it was like a seascape. And I don't know, I stood there and looked at it for a long time and just thought to myself, how can this guy break it down into such a simplistic form and still keep it alive as it is? And I just find it amazing. It's I don't know, the complexity of the simplicity is what really catches me, and the vibrance of your colors are just something that I can't get over, dude. Like, I really, really enjoy your art. Does this piece have a title?
Yes, this is titled Mirage. The titles, I actually don't title the paintings until after I'm finished with them, and it's more or less like the first thing that comes to mind after I'm finished looking at it. So when I start a painting, I don't really go into it with trying to paint any particular thing or place or object. Of course, it's more I have colors in mind of what I want the overall mood and tone of the painting to be, whether it's a light painting or a dark painting, and I get colors that I want to work with, and then go from there. And then after I'm finished, I'll kind of, just look at it and see,
just got to sit with it for a little while.
Just see kind of, what comes to mind as far as the title.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's kind of, where I start is just with color, and, what colors haven't I worked with yet? What combinations of colors haven't I worked with? And so you'll see a lot of the paintings have sort of a light and a dark element to them. And I like to kind of bounce the colors off each other. And with the lines, the one thing that I've, at least almost like a compulsion with myself, is that if you took this white line out, the painting would look completely different.
Yeah.
And it's like you said, the simplicity of the paintings, but
it's really complex. Like you say, that white line makes that difference.
If you took this gold out, it's a completely different painting. And so I'll play with them like that until I'm finished, until I feel it's done, adding colors or taking colors away. Yeah. So.
Let's look at some more of your art.
Sure. This painting is from 2015, actually. This is an early one. And, you know, this was one that...
So this is just a year or so after you got started.
Yeah, this was...
Wow.
No, I'm sorry. This is 2016.
Okay.
This is early 2016. You know, I can see the differences in a painting that I created last month and a painting that I created in 2016. I think if you look at a picture of it online, you can't tell the difference. I could see differences, and, you know, I've become more particular with them, and I've certainly become more liberal with texture now, and the amount of paint that I'm using on the canvas is more liberal now. But yeah, this was a somewhat earlier one, and you know, again, I don't really set out to like paint a landscape, but I look with abstract art, you know, whatever somebody sees in it, that's fine with me.
Yeah.
You know, I'm totally fine with that. You know, I don't. You know, everyone is going to see or feel something different in that. You know, so my goal is just to create an image that elicits some kind of response. You know, because I think when you have color as your main focal point, your subject is, you're not really trying to paint something in particular that
like a physical
form
yeah.
or a person or a place. You know, you're to me, what I'm trying to do is create a response. That's the
that
goal.
pure emotion.
Yeah. So whatever that may be for any particular person, you know, it's going to be different for everybody. But you know, that's the goal at the end of it.
Color theory is something that we all internalize without knowing it. Certain colors just capture our attention and emote this different feelings from us.
Yeah.
And so the title of this is?
This is titled After the Rain.
After the Rain. I like it.
Yeah,
I like it.
It's kind of a cheerful painting, I think, in some ways. It's bright, you know, and you know, I work a lot with you know, like I said, with acrylics, but you know, with blue, I incorporate blue into most of my paintings in some way or another, or you know, a Prussian blue or navy.
I did that unconsciously for a while.
Yeah.
There's a year I did 6 or 7 paintings, and the next year I looked at them and like, that's a lot of blue in there.
Yeah.
Like unconsciously, just, you know, gravitated towards the blue for a lot of those pieces. I actually like, I like the solid strips, but I like the strips that have the blended color in it as well.
Yeah.
That's so nice to me at the bottom. I really
Over
like
time, I've gotten more where, like, well, I think even now, the top part of the canvas, the paintings are typically divided almost like 3/4 and a quarter, you know, and I'll go where the top part you'll see more motion, more depth, more fluid, you know, strokes, where the bottom area is sort of more still and flat and
more structured.
And the paint is more flatly applied.
It kind of tells me we need structure,
yeah,
but not as much as
that's
we
what
need
I was,
motion,
you know,
and fluent.
That's, you know, when you spend a lot of time painting and you're alone, it's a solitary act, and you think a lot, and it gives me a lot of time to reflect. And I'll start looking at these paintings sometimes, and I'll think, you know, it's kind of an opportunity to kind of say, well, you know, we need a little bit of that division in our lives of movement and stillness.
Awesome.
You know?
Let's check out your last piece.
Yeah.
So Danny, this piece right here, what's the title of this?
This is titled Fleeting.
Fleeting. Oh.
Fleeting, yeah. I did this in North Carolina. Not really at the time with the Carolina blue in mind, but it just so happened I created it in North Carolina. And yeah, this painting's well traveled. This painting, I was at the University of Scranton for a while at the Loyola Science Center.
Oh, wow.
And then I had it in a show in North Carolina, and now it's back here. So it's interesting the journey that some of these paintings go on over time until they find a home.
Once again, your use of color, your use of motion, depth, fluidity, combined with the structure, and once again the simplistic complexity. It just, I really find your work captivating and amazing, man.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm so happy you came to sit and chat with me today.
Me too.
And share your art with us.
Thank you very much for having me. This was great. It was great to see you again.
Awesome, man.
Yeah.
This has been another episode of Electric City Television's Roundtable Discussions. I've been your host, Travis Prince, and our guest for today was Danny Laffey. Have a good one.